Appreciate
that
you,
was such a
man.
help for me to begin that way because I'm so excited to be a part of what you're doing here, man.
Well, that's cool, man. I'm glad to hear that you've kind of like dived deep into it
Yeah,
and you've been receiving what I've been putting down. And
absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
mean, I don't really. This is kind of interesting because you would think I talk to a lot of people about this, but I don't actually talk to anyone about this.
Yeah.
So like, how has your experience been diving deep into this podcast so far?
It's been really interesting because I listen to podcasts regularly, and this is my first experience of knowing someone that's hosting one that has been so consistent like you've been. Like, I'm sure there's some statistic about how many people have started and then stopped a podcast, but it's got to be, I would imagine it's like, 95% of people quit before episode 10 or some similar stat. So it's amazing that it says a lot about your character that you're just keeping it going, man. Um, I love the fact that you've got Daniel, who I'd love to meet someday. Maybe we can do a 3-person podcast one time.
Yeah.
That you have someone recurring. I think it's nice to have a continuing conversation with somebody. There's tremendous benefit. I think I've gotten tremendous benefit out of listening to individual podcast episodes, but you know, life is not just like one thing and then it's off to something else. Like it's got to recur. You got to return to the same things, especially if they're important things. You can't just do them one time. So it's cool that you're mixing it up between guests and then your buddy Dan.
I appreciate that, dude. Yeah, man. That was kind of the intention, right? And it's nice that this intention has come to like light and reality.
For sure.
Um, the whole consistent thing. Like I told myself two things when beginning this. I was just like, stay consistent, don't overthink it. That was it, dude. That's all
Perfect.
I'm focusing on.
Perfect.
Because I've come to a
Words to live
place.
by in almost any situation.
Exactly, right? I've come to a place where it's like after sharing so much in my life, I realize that like, look, man, anything I share is how I'm feeling in that moment and isn't binding to my character or
Yes,
my
of
person.
course,
And so don't overthink it. And number two, it's just like, man, just show up, dude. Because
for sure.
this is what I really want to do. And there may be days where, it's like, oh, like kind of like going to the gym. It's like, man, I don't feel like going to the gym today. But
I
it's
was
like,
about
no,
to
but like,
say,
this is what I want to do though, right? So
yeah.
like
I mean,
switch it.
that's when I'm talking to my clients, the people I work with, I very early on in the process, I'm like, there's going to be no perfect day where your whole day is going to align and we're going to have the perfect session together. I was like, if you're injured, let's do it. If you're feeling sick but not contagious, let's meet up. If you'd rather go on a walk today instead of doing something more vigorous, if you'd rather just do some somatic sensing work instead of anything actively physical, that's what we need that day. But yeah, and it's not the same sort of like no days off, sort of like hard charging mantra. It's like, especially if you're very consistent, you don't have to push too hard any one time in any one thing because we're all going to make mistakes every time. And that's the only, in my personal experience and with the people I've worked with, it's the mistakes that are the most interesting moments. Like if you're going to tell a story, like about a vacation you took, no one wants to hear about how relaxing and like chill it was. They want to hear about the one crazy taxi driver you had or something that went wrong, but then you survived from. Those are the real rich moments.
Yeah, dude, for sure. It's and so it's interesting like reflecting back on when I met you. And so it's like I met you through
Yeah.
Ramez, obviously, right?
Yeah. Already on the
And
pod.
yeah, dude. And I don't know if you know this, but like, so when I had a 9 to 5, the only 9 to 5 I've ever had, I was a physical performance coach for a Division 1 men's soccer team. Like that's all I ever
Okay.
did. So I did that for
Cool.
like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And I mean, I was just very interested in the human body and the way it moved and everything like
Yeah.
that, right? And I kind of went
Hmm.
like above and beyond what I would consider like most people did, and so I was really into it. And then when I got done with that, I kind of had my own journey. I had
Yeah.
like I injured my left hip. I don't know how it just became like I think I just like created like a hypermobility in my left hip, and that kind of like led to some other stuff. And so I had to
That'll
go on
happen.
this like insane journey in order to
Yeah.
heal that and got deep into certain things like like foundational training and all these different things, right? And then when Ramez is like, "Hey, you want to come along?" and then I met you, and I was like, "Dude, this is my jam. Like, this is my jam, dude. Like, this is a
Awesome.
guy that like
Awesome.
I could, I mean, not only enjoy this session, but like could really go deep with." And so, I'm really excited to have you on here to
Thank you
talk
for
more
having me.
about, yeah, dude, to talk more about like what you're doing and what's going on, like your philosophies and
Yeah,
kind of how you got to where you are. But like, before we get into that, just kind of tell me like what's going on now, like what are you excited
sure.
about now, like what's your world, what's all in your world now, kind of let people know what you're doing and who you are.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, specifically, I'm really excited about Miami in
Hmm.
May.
Hmm.
That's going to be an experience. And that actually dovetails really nicely with sort of where I am in my process with working with people. So I work mostly with people in a physical capacity, if you want to call it a performance coach or a personal trainer, a teacher. I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me. But that's sort of the entry point of the work I do with people. And I work sort of in the tradition of, because I've studied with him directly and then worked indirectly through one of his most senior students, a guy named Ido Portal, an Israeli guy who, over a decade, maybe 2 decades now, began exploring all areas of movement, started using just the term movement to describe what he was doing, what he was studying both for himself and with his students. And Brian, my friend Brian Johnson, who has a place in Dallas where you met and we trained at, called the Movement Standard. I've been lucky enough to both teach classes there and then see individual clients there since 2017. And we study whatever modality is useful in the moment. All of them, even what I'm going to speak about today and what we're going to talk about, these are all just perspectives. They're models to try on, like a set of clothes to see if they fit well, or if the style is right for you, if it's your vibe. The nice thing is I'm not dogmatic about any of them individually, because I'd rather have a big toolbox than just one giant tool that I use for everything. Brian will talk about, like, going to the hardware store and then you just look at the wall of hammers, and it's like, just now it's just a hammer store. It's like you're going to hammer everything. Every problem is going to look like a nail. Um, and that's not incredibly helpful, because not every problem is a nail. So when I work with people, it's very individualized. Some people have specific goals, like a woman I'm working with is recovering from a stroke, and it's been just a journey to get functionality back to the point where she's balancing maybe better than she was previously to the stroke. I'm working with a teenager who's an American Ninja Warrior competitor, nationally ranked in his age group, but he came in because he had a pars fracture, a small fracture in his spine, and has recently had a pretty severe ankle sprain. And then I've got guys like Ramesh that are just like, he's bought all in. He wants to explore it all. And so we'll have sessions that look like strength. We'll have sessions that look like break dancing. We have sessions that may look like stretching. We have sessions that may look meditative. And I know you're asking, what am I doing now? What I'm attempting to do is get to the point where I feel very grateful for all my clients that I have here in Dallas, but I'd love to be able to be useful to people that aren't here. So really, like, the synergy of being on this podcast, of going to Miami, it's all happening at the right time, man. Because, if anyone listens to this and they find it at least curious and they want to message me, they can. Like, Instagrams will be the easiest place. But yeah, man, it's like I'm just starting to now develop beyond my current state.
That's really cool, dude. It's pretty cool and interesting. Like something I've noticed in my life is like as soon as I start giving like energy, and it doesn't have to be action, but as soon as I start
Yeah,
giving energy to like certain ideas, like what you're talking about, like, oh, like I'd really want to kind of work with other people, things just kind of show up, right? And it's
for
just like,
sure.
oh, hey, man, you want to do this
Yeah,
podcast? Hey, dude, you want to come to Miami?
yeah, and it's so true. But also, I think important part to remember is that I have to be doing a good enough job taking care of myself and working on myself that I feel comfortable saying yes to
Mm,
these opportunities. Because there's been some dark times in my life where I would have said no to this podcast,
mm.
where I would have said no to Remez. I'm like, no, I'm not ready for that. Just like everybody, like that's not a unique story. Everyone goes through various dark nights of the soul or other, issues. And so I just feel very grateful that the synergy of me being in this place in my life right now has occurred with this opportunity with you and with both you and Remez in May.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. I'm super excited. I mean, so much intention has gone into this event.
Yeah, man.
And I don't know how much Ramez told you. I'm pretty sure he told you everything, like what happened after the last event. Like I wasn't involved in that at all. And then
Yeah.
and then after that, okay, we sat down with him at home. I was like, look, dude, I want to get involved, and this is how we're gonna like.
Yes.
This is what we want to do.
Yeah.
And
He just sent me the tentative, or I don't know how tentative. Maybe it's all locked in, the itinerary
oh yeah,
today, and it
yeah,
looks. I'm thrilled, man. It looks exciting.
yeah, dude. I'm pumped about it, man. I'm super pumped.
Yeah.
Um, so I definitely want to talk about the lady that you're working with. You sent me that Substack, but before we
Yeah.
get to that, real
Of
quick,
course.
I want to like know more about, dude. Like, how did you get to where you are? Like,
Great
what at what
question.
point were you just like, oh, I want to do this, dude, and I'm all in.
Yeah. It's I'm sure like a lot of people, there were starts and stops to it. Like just like anything, you get excited about it, and maybe that excitement dissipates, or some demons in your life pull you away from it. But to give you like the medium length version is I also had one 9 to 5 job right out of college, and it was I was selling insurance, and I lasted about 9 months. And during that 9 month period, I got really into my yoga practice, which I'd started in college, to the point where I was using it almost therapeutically. It's like I'd go to the 6 a.m. class and then head to work. And then if it was a bad day at work, I'd also attend the 6 p.m. class after work, just to even myself out. And I was super fortunate, man. Like I didn't, my family really took care of me. I had no college debt. So I didn't have to, about 9 months in, I sent an email to my dad. It was probably like 2 or 3 in the morning. I was pretty nervous about it. And I was like, Dad, I think I'm going to quit my job. I think I'd like to become a yoga teacher. And he sent me an email back. At least this is how I remember. Maybe it was a phone call. However, he responded and he told me, he's like, great. My dad was an attorney. He hated being an attorney, but he did not grow up in the situation that he provided for me and my brother and our family. And he told me, he's like, I became a lawyer because I knew it would make me a bunch of money, or at least I would be comfortable. And he's like, the fact that I did that, so now that you can make this choice. I mean, I'm just kind of getting a little misty about it, even talking about it right now, man. Cause he was, we never really talked like that before until this big moment came up, you know? And so I just felt simultaneously tremendous gratitude, but also like the love that I could, that my choice or my ability to make that choice, what that meant to him, you know? So yeah, I actually haven't told that story in a really long time. Thank you for
It's
letting me bring that up.
yeah,
So I
man.
did that. I became a yoga teacher. And of course, it was very hard at the beginning. This would have been about 2009. So yoga was pretty popular here in the US. I live in Dallas, Texas. I lived there then too. And, I went to Southern Methodist University, SMU. That's where Ramez went to. And I was a fraternity guy. And so, like, all of this, some people are like, oh, that's interesting, that you're going to do this. The people that mattered to me most, they were very supportive. But I came back from a yoga teacher training. I studied with a man named Dharma Mitra in New York City, who's a wonderful, wonderful teacher. Um, I came back, I couldn't get a job as a yoga teacher because I didn't have any experience, totally understandable, right? And so I was selling shoes at a store called Whole Earth Provisions. I was a waiter at a place called the Cosmic Cafe. I was taking tickets at this place called the Granada Theater. No one who's not from Dallas is going to know what this means, but I,
Hmm.
I picked all sorts of odd jobs. And then every time I got on and then I started subbing at yoga studios, getting on the sub list. And then every time I was able to get like one solid class that was for lack of a better word, mine. It was my, like, that was recurring. I knew weekly. I would drop one of the shift work shifts I had. And piecemeal over time, I became a full-time yoga teacher, probably 2011, 2012. And then that kept, I kept studying with both Dharma, I did more teacher training with, and then I studied with a teacher named Anna Forrest, who was wonderful, and Rod Stryker. Kind of like old school, very like not just the physical practice, but the yamas and the niyamas, the ethical rules, the mantra. We studied the sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, the whole buffet. And to the point where I was pretty successful. I had a lot of classes that I really enjoyed. I started having private students that I saw one-on-one that was both incredibly enriching for me, but also like, financially, that was super helpful, to have private individual clients. And then sort of simultaneously, sort of like how right now I'm doing this podcast and about to go with you maybe to Miami, not maybe, when I go to Miami, I had a yoga teacher friend that I did teacher training with named Ben. And he at the time had a retreat center in the south of France called Lux Yoga. And he did
Ben.
retreats. Yeah. And
I met
so
Ben at Burning Man. He's great.
That's
dude.
where Memez been. And so my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, we went to one of his retreats. And one of the sessions he did wasn't yoga. It was cool, but it was not a yoga class. And so I asked him about it, and he's like, oh yeah, I just did this workshop somewhere in Europe. I don't know what, not in France, but somewhere, called Movement X with a guy named Ido Portal. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, I really enjoyed that. And not simultaneously, obviously on the trip, but just a few weeks and months before, I'd started taking a class from now my very good friend and personal teacher, Brian, that he called Primal Movement. And it was at a yoga studio I was teaching. It was at a time of day where they couldn't get it. It was like Saturday afternoon. So it was like an open thing. And we were just sort of, honestly, it's been so long. That would have been 2014. We were crawling around and rolling around on the ground, basically. And when I got back from the retreat with Ben, I was like, hey, Brian, it's like, I heard about this guy named Ido Portal. It seems like what you're doing is, they seem like they go well together. He's like, oh yeah, man, I've been studying his stuff on YouTube for years. He's got so much good content on there and it's free right now. And I was like, cool. And then I looked into it and I was like, Brian, I was like, Ido does online coaching. It's expensive, but like we can pay and be coached directly from Ido and his team. So Brian and I started that in 2014. And Brian has been a nonstop, continuous student of Ido's since that time. So probably one of the longest running continuous students that Ido has, certainly in America, probably the world. And I was very inconsistent for a long period of time. And to be perfectly frank about that had a lot to do with I had a pretty bad substance abuse problem. Mm-hmm. I grew up, the same loving father I had, he was an alcoholic. And I started drinking when I was 13, started using drugs when I was 18, and was pretty, I was high functioning, you might say. And then my dad passed in 2017. And things got a little, either that was the catalyst or coincidental, things got a little more severe for me at that time. Not a unique story, right? So all this time I'm being a yoga teacher. I'm trying to be healthy. I'm starting this more vigorous, very demanding physical movement practice. And so I'd go really far and then I'd fall off the wagon and I'd fall off again. And this flow of life was pretty consistent. And then in about 2020, which was in the middle of the pandemic, I finally, the waveform of those ups and downs got so severe that my wife was like, I love you, but I don't really like you right now. And got to the point where my brother got involved and they were super supportive, but they were like, hey man, either go to a meeting or go to rehab. And I was like, okay. So I started going to AA, and I'll be sober almost 4 years in May. 4 years in May, May 16th.
Nice, dude.
And so since that time, I've just done everything I did before. The excitement, the passion for study, for self-study, without the self-sabotage.
Mm.
You know, and obviously there's days where like I self-sabotage, but that's more like I eat more ice cream than I wanted to. You know,
Yeah,
that
I
sort of
got you.
self-sabotage.
Yeah, I got you, dude.
And so yeah. So I, even though Brian and I started together, I consider myself very much his student because he's just kept going up, and I was up and down, up and down, up and down.
Mm.
But again, like we even started with, like, you know, the fun, easy, relaxing story is not the one anyone can wants to hear, or you know, maybe they like to hear it, but it may not resonate very much. And in a way, I mean, only because I've gotten my way through it, but I'm very grateful for that entire experience because it's helped me when I work with clients. I don't work specifically with people that have suffered the same issues I have, but whether it's someone with a back injury or a stroke, or just someone who's like, man, hit a wall and realized that like they're, you know, they need some help. You know, it helps that I also needed some help
Yeah,
at some time. And
yeah.
so yeah. And that's where I am today. I'm just um more comfortable than ever sharing that story about myself, which, as you might imagine, I'm sure for a lot of people, it's, you know, it's not something I advertise, but you know, if it's helpful to people, I definitely, with my clients, the people I work with, like all I have is my own perspective. So I share all of my perspectives that I have with them.
I
Yeah.
I feel that authenticity and vulnerability is
Dude.
like superpowers that we have,
Yeah.
and at
And it's still
times
so scary, even though we know this.
for sure, dude, 100%. But that's the like that's where the power comes, right? Like even though it's scary, you let
Yeah.
it out anyway, and even though you
Yeah,
may not feel like it, you let it out anyway.
for
And by
sure.
doing that, we give other people permission to do the same. And like that's, I mean, it's so interesting, you know. Like I used to live a life where it was like I used to have this belief of like, you know, I would make people earn my trust, and I would make
Mhm.
people earn my love and all this type of
Yeah,
shit, right?
sure.
And that just made me live a life of just like consistently judging people 24/7,
Yeah.
normally based off the judgments of myself. But it was so amazing, man. Like once I let that go, and on top of that, started just really like letting everything out, you know, all my authenticity, all my vulnerability, relationships, I would just create deep relationships within like moments, you know,
Sure.
and I
Yeah,
just
man.
think it's so beautiful to be able to offer ourselves that and offer the world that. So I say thank you, and I appreciate you sharing everything.
Well, thank you, man.
Um,
I appreciate you too. And the truth about it, and this is something that I still see my sponsor once a week if we have time together. And what he always tells me, he's like, dude, even though we're meeting about you, you know, it's helping me.
100%.
You know, it's like,
100%,
so it's
dude.
this funny thing. It's like, it's you can think of it selfishly if you want to, in a lighthearted way.
Hmm.
Like it's good for me. It's probably the most healing thing I can do is to share my experience so that it can help somebody else.
There's a beautiful series of books called The Law of One, the raw materials.
Okay.
And they talk about like this idea of like that we're in like a teach, learn, teach dimension, which pretty much
Yes.
means like as we're teaching, we're learning, and as we're learning, we're teaching kind of thing, right? And it's
Yes.
like such a beautiful thing to like think about and feel into because it's so true, right? It really
Yes.
is. It also like for me kind of like piggybacks on top of the realization and the reality of like when I give, I receive, you know?
Yes.
Um, and that was something I didn't always realize either. But it's really
Yeah.
nice, dude. It's really nice.
Yeah.
So like as you were sharing your story, a few things come up for me, dude.
Great.
Firstly, like you sharing, I'm sure it was like scary to share what you did with your dad about, hey man, I want to be a yoga teacher.
It was.
Um,
Yes. I had some anxiety
and
about it.
yeah, I'm sure you did, dude. But like how cool like those moments are, and I understand that they don't always go that way, but ultimately it's still amazing because it's like we're like, hey man, like this is scary, but I'm going to do it anyway. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's nice to be received in love and be received in support.
Yes.
And I'm sure you had many moments where you weren't, like you mentioned, by your other
Yes.
friends and stuff like that, but
Yeah,
you went anyway, right?
I did.
And I just love that. It made me think about like moments in my life where I'd experienced that. Also moments
Awesome.
in my life where I feel like I made the shift from me looking at my mom and dad as like parent figures to then me looking at my mom and dad as like unbelievable like friends and guides.
Yes.
And we could talk about things that I didn't feel like I could talk about earlier on in my life,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And that was super cool. And then, you know, another thing that kind of came up for me was just like all the people that you have like met and attracted like throughout your life of you following this kind of feeling that you've had,
Yes.
and no doubt the effect they've had on you, but also the effect that you've had on them, right?
Yeah.
um
I hope so.
100%, dude. And you won't always hear from them, but it's definitely happened.
Yeah.
And just like this like mentor mentee kind of relationship and how like important that is, I feel, for like people to have, and not everyone gets that as much as I feel like they would like it. But
Yeah.
it's really important, dude. It's really important.
I couldn't agree
um
more, man.
yeah. and uh and so that kind of leads me to like, so you sent me your a Substack article, and
Yeah.
so I read through it, and it was,
Thank you
number
for that.
one, very beautifully like written, but at the same
Thank
time
you.
like super cool because that chick, Simone de Beauvoir, like
Yeah.
had me like thinking, dude,
Yes.
about like different things. It had me like questioning certain experiences of my own, and you can call them beliefs of my own,
Yeah. Of
right?
course.
And so kind of let's start here, right? So like the philosopher Simone de Beauvoir like describes human experience as a tension between two things: facticity and transcendence. And you kind of brought that into play with that woman that you're working with that had a stroke. And so
Yes.
kind of like expand on those things
Thank
for
you.
me. Yeah.
Thank you for letting me do that.
Yeah.
Before we start, I just want to say that Simone de Beauvoir is one philosopher, and that this conversation that we're about to have is just a model. Again, like a physical practice, working with someone, finding a mentor. It is not the absolute truth. It is a perspective or a tool for self-examination. So with that caveat being said, this aspect of her philosophy, she describes facticity as sort of the things we can't change about ourselves. You know, who our parents are, the country we grew up in, our current physical state. These are un, unchangeable to some degree parts of ourselves. And the important thing is to hold that honestly, like not lie to yourself about it, but not get stuck there. And, the title of that Substack is "You Are Not Your Story," because a lot of people, they just stop there. Even if they're being very honest about it, that is who they are. And then it calcifies. So let's talk about me for a second. I could have just been like an alcoholic and a drug addict. That could have been my story forever. And it's still a part of one. I'm in recovery. I'm not going to ignore it. Like, I'm going to be very considered with that thing in mind, with the life I lead from here on out. And then my client, Michelle, who I did ask her, she doesn't mind me using her name. Her facticity was she had a stroke. And you can't, and that one, in a way, it's not a gift, but it's very easy to then be honest with yourself. Like, this is my current state. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to lie about it at that point. But what she did, and this is what Simone de Beauvoir talks about in this idea of transcendence, is she looked around when she was at the hospital right after that stroke, and she saw people that just stopped there, and that was their story. And they never recovered. They just became a stroke victim. And they, it is understandable why someone would just stay there in that state. I can't imagine the pain and frustration and the difficulty and the deep searching in one's soul of being there, especially when you're still at the hospital, man.
Mm-hmm.
But she saw it, she's like, and immediately she's like, I'm getting out of here. You know, I'm not, this is not the end for me. And so, for example, like she's done all the work. Like I haven't done anything. You know, you use the language of holding space,
Mm.
and Ido describes it as like, uh, um, he doesn't say hold the space. He says allows the conditions for something to emerge,
Mm-hmm.
facilitates the conditions for something to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And at best, in my words, it's like at best I could be a catalyzing agent,
Mm-hmm.
like in that chemistry. I can boop, put something in and maybe something will happen. So when she and I meet, for example, at the start we were just sitting at a table and pretending to basically play the piano on the table, like just having her walk her fingers up the table and down the table and see if she could keep her left hand going with her right. And that was like, and then we like peeled an orange and did like Thich Nhat Hanh's like tangerine or orange meditation. You
Mm.
know, if you've not heard that, yeah, it's worth checking out. I think it's sometimes it's written as the tangerine meditation, sometimes the orange meditation, but Google that for anybody who's listening or watching. And both, that was a beautiful practice in and of itself, but physiologically, it was hard for her to peel that orange. I had to kind of, so this is a good example of facilitating the conditions. I
Mm-hmm.
had to kind of break the skin for her, and then she could start the peeling. Now she doesn't need me to do that. You know, sometimes if like funny water bottles at her gym, they're really tightly squeezed, I might have to crack it open a little for her. But I'm just there to facilitate the conditions for something inside of her to emerge. I can't do the work for her, and that wouldn't serve her if I could. You know,
Yeah.
it's like I'm sure when you guide people
Mm.
hunting,
Mm.
they're not going to get anything out of it if you're just giving them a piggyback the whole way through and then shooting the gun for them or the bow or whatever. Like they're there to have the experience themselves. You know, it's not worth anything if they're just watching it. It's got to be an active process.
Yeah, and it takes a very aware, present person that desires to serve the other in order to like create that space, because very easily like we can take on like the identity of kind of like the savior, right? It's like, oh no, like let me do it for you, man, like I got you.
Yes.
And like
Yes.
under the illusion that I'm being helpful.
Of
And it's like,
course.
well, there is a side of that where, yeah, okay, like you are like helping in this way, but like ultimately I like there is that other understanding where it's like I'm actually not being of service though. Like again, these are just words, but you know what I mean, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's like
um
the aphorism you give a man a fish, you teach a man to fish.
Correct, dude. Same thing, right? Same
Yeah.
thing. And so it's really nice to be able to, you know, be aware of that and create that space. And I think what also comes along with that, you know, something that, you know, my wife, you know, is really, I would say, my greatest teacher in this, because she
Mm.
constantly presents me with opportunities to do so, is like allowing other people to suffer, realizing that there is like beautiful lessons and teachings within the suffering, right?
Mhm.
And when I say suffering, that could be something as like, hey, I can't peel this orange, or
Yeah.
something where it's just like, you know, where it gets really hard, dude. Whereas like someone blames you for something, and you know
Yeah.
within yourself that like you were very loving in that moment, and this is just you expressing your true self, right? And they're like,
Yeah.
no, what you did hurt me. And so it's like the ability to allow that, you know, without reacting, without identifying, and realizing that it's really important, man. Like that type of suffering is super important, and can, not all the time, but can definitely
Yes.
lead to greater strengths and greater awareness, right?
No doubt, man. Like as I was listening to the podcasts that you've done so far and taking my notes and planning for this conversation, something that came up for me was that I want the people I work with, my clients, to feel simultaneously safe and uncomfortable.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like
like
that.
I don't want them to have any fear for or of like any sort of danger,
Yeah.
but like if it's all super light and easy, nothing is happening,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, it's interesting too, because like as you say that, what comes up for me is like obviously the Miami event that we're creating, like a big
Yeah.
like focus for that is creating a safe container. But at the same time, it's like, so there's the ability to feel uncomfortable without a safe container, right? And that's one
Sure.
type of like uncomfortability. But then there's like, okay, wait, so like now I'm in a safe container. You mean I can do whatever I want? Or maybe
Yes.
I've never explored the fact that I can do whatever I want. And so then that becomes uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? This idea of
Yeah.
like, all right, like, how about I do this thing and I've never done this before, but like I really want to, right? And
Right.
so like that's super cool. So as you say that, that's kind of what comes up for me. And that's what I desire to create. That's the, as Ido talks about, right? Like, being the stimulus or, whatever he's saying, like being that,
Mhm.
say that again.
Yeah. So to facilitate the situation, facilitate the
Correct.
environment for something to
Correct. Right.
emerge.
Like create that environment where
Yeah.
something can emerge that maybe hasn't emerged before, but has wanted to.
Hmm.
Right. And that's what I get really excited
Yeah.
about, dude. It's so cool.
And be honest, so just to, and this might be an interesting way to delve into like maybe more specifically like the physical practices that I share with people.
Yeah.
Um, a container is necessary to hold the content.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's like water from a well, you need that bucket, man. The hands are not going to be enough. Now, the danger is you get obsessed with the bucket and you forget to even drink the water. So, like people who get very dogmatic about a specific physical practice
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of fetishize it, they're fetishizing the container. They've kind of forgotten about the content inside. They even start like eating consuming the container, and then the water's spilling out. Um, and we talk about this at the Movement Standard, and Ido shares this on the many podcasts he's been on. You can only have real freedom if there's something to contain that space, that time, that practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like a good example is we do, at the Movement Standard, and when I teach people, depending on what they're interested in, locomotion, which looks like crawling around on the ground or breakdancing. If people just watch on social media and it looks it's too much, or they come to a class for the first time, there's too many options because it is almost infinite. And that's not, it's like now it's just like to keep the water metaphor going. Now it's like the fire hose is turned on and they're just getting blasted in the face with all of this content. So you need to like turn it back down so it's dripping to a point that you can fill a cup with or just, sip from. So in the world of locomotion, for this one example, it's like maybe we just start crawling on the ground, opposite hand and foot at the same time, or one limb at a time, hand, foot, hand, whatever. And that's a digestible amount. And then we get a bigger container. We add more parts of the practice, whether it's specific techniques or skills. Like people love to learn skills, hand balancing, for example. Like that's a very common one. People come in, like, I'd like to learn how to handstand. It's like, okay, we have this container of practice for that. Or if it's just like mobility, like or balance, it's like, okay, here are some tools that are digestible. And then we'll just keep adding to whatever degree people want to add.
It's really
But
nice. Like,
yeah.
to like, so something that I always really enjoyed was taking a step back and slowing things down, and I think
Mm-hmm.
like for most people, especially most people that like I've encountered, when it comes to like this idea of like workout time
Yeah.
or like, I have this finite amount of time. I have to make myself sweat as much as possible. I have to get my heart rate up as
Yes.
high as possible and
Sure.
all these different
Sure.
things. I'm sure you deal with this all the time, dude.
Yeah.
And so like, what would you say to people like that?
Well, first of all, I would say that I too feel that way still sometimes.
Mm-hmm,
Like sometimes I just want to get it in.
mm-hmm,
I like to drive myself. I really lean into the more physiologically demanding parts of my practice, whether it's the strength work or the locomotion that can be quite conditioning dependent. And so I have a teacher, Brian directly in this lineage of Idos, that in my program, I have a program that he writes for me that lasts, 6 to 8 weeks or longer, and then we readjust and reassess. There's parts of my program that I have and that I don't want to do, but I have a teacher that's guiding me through it. And I don't feel unsafe. I just don't like it. Specifically, it is the subtler parts of my practice. Currently, it's standing. So it looks very similar to what someone might do in Tai Chi or Qigong. Standing pole, for example, standing tree, where I'm held in these physiological positions that I'm trying to find a posture in which I'm releasing my tension.
Mm.
And if you hold them for long enough, you really start to feel like, oh my gosh, like I can't release my right shoulder. And it's incredibly frustrating. And in my mind, my internal monologue, it sometimes will be like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I don't want to do this. But I've trusted the process. I trust my teacher enough to stick with it. And also realizing, not in a masochistic way, but maybe more in a stoic way. I did enjoy reading quite a bit of stoic philosophy for a period of my life, but like the part that I don't like, that's the most important part of my practice. Because on a bad day where I've 45 minutes, or I get an argument with my wife or whatever the thing is, I can get in the things I like, no problem. I've gotten to a place in my life where I practice every day, no matter what. But I need a teacher, or a mentor, whatever language someone wants to use, or else I'm just going to do what I want to do. And I don't hold too many beliefs like in absolute truth sort of sense, but I do hold space for the fact that like I think it's important to be doing things that, whether you want to call it make you uncomfortable or you don't want to do them. I think that's probably more valuable than the stuff that you want to do or are good at,
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. 100%. I mean, it's definitely been my experience. And like so much to the point where like for a lot, like there was a season of my life that's all I was focused on. You know what I mean? I was just like, all right, dude, like
I mean,
let's
me too.
let's find all of these places and all of these experiences where I'm like either fearful or uncomfortable and so on and so forth. I'm like, all right, let's just go like straight towards those,
Yeah.
And it was beautiful because like what I started to realize was like on the other side of that, it felt like freedom. It felt like peace.
Yes.
It felt like an opening, a lightness, right?
Uh-huh.
And pretty much it felt like the complete opposite to what
Yeah.
it felt like before I kind of stepped into it, right? It just, and I just realized like it's all just kind of like smoke and mirrors. And within those smoke and mirrors, amazing lessons, right?
Yes.
Amazing lessons. And so, yeah, I really enjoy that, and something for the people listening is just like, take note of these things that you maybe feel uncomfortable and maybe you want to walk the other way, as long as it's not a cliff, that you walk off and you die. It's like, hey man, like maybe like walk that way and just kind of like be open to the experience and see what happens.
No doubt, man. I can say from both my personal practice and the practice of my clients, I and they have gained the most confidence from overcoming those points of friction, from taking something that you didn't like to do into something that you like to do, or taking something you were bad at into making it something you were good at. That's where real confidence comes from. It's not from stuff you're already good at. That's, that sort of leads into arrogance.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with being proud of the skills you've earned. But, after a while, I'm sure you've done this many times. I've found this experience. Let's just keep it in the physical realm. I learn a skill. I learn how to balance on my hands. I don't feel some magical moment of, it's like, no, now I'm practicing balancing on one hand, and not in a bad nihilistic way, but it's like, you've talked about this many times on your podcast, like the journey is it, man. Because the only destination is death.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the end, the only end.
Yeah. In your Substack article, de Beauvoir talks about that as well, right? She says the same thing, right? She talks about how like, really like the happiness, she used the words happiness, but it's like the happiness is in the journey, right?
Yes.
And
that makes me think of another person. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
I have like direct teachers like Brian and Ido, people that I've had direct experience with. But then there's, as you may see, like I read a lot. And I think to like I'm still a student all the time. But one teacher, one person, Viktor Frankl, whose most famous book is Man's Search for Meaning, specifically talking about happiness. He's like, happiness, and this is a paraphrase, it's like happiness is not something you can pursue, it ensues. You can't go directly at it.
Mm-hmm.
You practice something and it will arise. And so when we talk about happiness, I would say that's a bad goal in the sense that like you shouldn't,
Agreed.
if you draw, any times I've driven directly at happiness, that usually was, if I was being honest with myself, it was more pleasure.
100%.
And coming from my background, that didn't work out too well for me when I was driving directly at pleasure.
It kind of goes back to like what we were talking about when we first started talking about like de Beauvoir and like
Yeah.
her ideas, right? It's like this idea of like a word that I use that she wasn't using, and when you're explaining it, you weren't using, like, he's like identification, like, or when I
Yes.
identify with something, like if I identify with this stroke, or if I identify with this pain, or whatever it is that we identify with, like becomes us, or we make it a part of us, right?
It's
But it's not actually us. It's obviously not us, right? It's an experience that I'm having.
Yes.
It's a feeling that I'm feeling, but it's not us. But like when we make it us, then we can have this feeling of, let's just say, the opposite of happiness.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I identify with something, for example, if I identify myself as, I used to play soccer, right? So I've had this experience many times.
Yeah.
I identify myself as a goalkeeper, right?
Yep.
And that's who I am. Ben is a goalkeeper. And so like I would go out there and I would have like the best game, dude. And I would just be like pumped, so happy, right?
Yep.
And then I would have a bad game, and now Ben would not be happy. Ben would be sad and upset and frustrated, right? And all of these things. And like Ben hasn't changed. Like I haven't become more worthy or less worthy or anything like that. I've just identified with this role that I'm playing, and based off my judgments of how I did, now I go up and down. And I just think don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful for those experiences in my life, because they taught me, to be where I am now, like much more just kind of like centered, and not just jumping up and down based off these identities. But at the same time, I think for a lot of people, again, including myself, at a certain point in life, like happiness was this thing that would not only create like happiness, it would also create the opposite, right? Like my pursuit for happiness was always going to create the opposite of happiness, because I was so identified with trying to create it. And so I think people can find themselves in that loop a lot. I found myself in that loop a lot. And it's just so much, I mean, it's so much, I don't know, use the word easier, because it's not easier, but it's definitely like, it's much more peaceful to just kind of like not identify with things, or just be aware, because it's going to happen from time to time. But just kind of do your best, like not identify with things, and just do things and experience things. And curiosity is my favorite word, dude. Just be curious, man. And that's what I view your practice as, is just like, I'm just going to come and I'm just going to be super curious. Like, let's explore our bodies. Like, let's explore this movement. And like, and that's something I love. I love it so deeply, especially when I'm exploring my body, because man, it's this thing that I've been with my entire life, and it grows and it changes, and it's amazing, and it heals itself. It's like, dude, what is this thing, man? It's crazy.
It's awesome. I think two things that came immediately to mind when you were speaking there is like, I'm so glad that you pointed out that identification happens both in the positive and in the negative realm in our lives. Like you positively identifying with like high skill development as a goalie or a soccer player, and then the opposite. And that in and again, and also that you said that identification, it's not good or bad. In fact, it's inevitable. And in fact, maybe the real practice would be not fighting the identification, but noticing it and sitting with it. You and Daniel talked, I think, one episode about contrast, right? And so I mean, that is a contrast in our lives. We identify with stuff, whether it's good for us or bad for us, whether it's a high moment or a low moment. And those contrasts, that's what keeps life interesting, man. If we were just one note all the time, like if you listen to music and it was one note, man, that is some boring ass shit. Like maybe good for a meditative moment if it's like a certain hertz.
Yeah.
But like for in Miami, like what if the DJ just came on and just was like, boop, one note? You know, that is not what you want. You want the contrast in life.
Yeah, you do.
You want the paradox. Like, I mean, so many episodes you had, there's paradoxical moments in life, in philosophy, in conversation. That's really where the richness is. I mean, in all of these books, none of these books are about a purely happy story. You know, even like, let me, if you'll permit me, like,
yeah, go for it.
All right, so this is Anna Karenina.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one of the great books. This is the first sentence. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And then this book is like 1,000 pages about this single unhappy family. What makes us each, unique is I'm going to put that back later, is those contrasts, the low moments and the high. No one wants to hear about, your happy story. They want to learn about how you transcended something or overcame something. Like, that would be the most boring podcast in the world. It would just like, let me tell you about all the good stuff that happened.
Yeah.
It's like, enjoy them, enjoy those moments, but that's probably less than half the story. And that's okay. That's what makes life rich and interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting because like, obviously, within this physical experience, we have certain emotions that make us feel what we call really good. And then we have other emotions that make us feel what we call really bad.
Yeah.
And like, for me, like I bring a lot of awareness to like kind of changing that language and just realizing like, this isn't a bad feeling. This is like a feeling. And so like by doing that, again, it's not easy because like you're in pain or like, whatever it is. Right. But at the same time, it's like, it has to be here. Like it has to be here. That's why it's here.
No doubt.
And so to be like this idea of like, no, I need to get rid of this. Like you're never going to get rid of it. It's here. It's part of it. Right. Yep. And so knowing that you're never going to get rid of it, knowing that it's not going to go anywhere, it exists within this realm, then all right, maybe I can change my relationship to it. Right. Or with it. And that's cool, man. That's been super fun. Right. Or it's like, sadness arises within my body and I'm like curious about the sadness rather than like, I don't want to be sad and all this type of stuff, right? I'm appreciative for the sadness, especially now because I don't get sad anywhere as much as I used to. And so it's like now when it comes up, I'm more appreciative of it because it's like, all right, wow, like where have you been kind of thing, right?
It also hits you probably stronger because it doesn't happen as often.
For sure, dude, for sure. And it's kind of something that like, there was a moment in my life where I was kind of seeking sadness because I was just like, bro, is there something in there that I'm not allowing to come out? Because I haven't felt this in a while. So like, am I suppressing it? Like what's going on kind of thing? And so it's super interesting, dude, because it's like, it's like this idea of like, oh, a lot of people never want to be sad, but then like maybe when you're not sad for a really long time, you get to the point where it's like, like where is that sadness? That's kind of where I got to.
So I love that example. Let me bring another one up to sort of flavor things. Sadness is a good example, but like injury, physical injury, you can just let it, throw you off, or you can get really curious, to use your word. Why did this injury occur? Not in the karmic sense, but like physiologically. What was going on there? What in the body? What in my lifestyle? And then your injury can be a transformative experience, one that you would have never had without the injury. And it doesn't need to be a serious one. I mean, I've had plenty of, I would say my body's never 100%. There's always something going on.
Especially when you're hyper aware of your body.
Yeah. And that is, I would hesitate for people to get too fetishistic about that as well.
For sure.
Too much into sensing without like doing anything with those sensations. But, Brian and I and Ido's said a version of this is like never waste an injury. Or for your example, like never waste a moment of sadness. Don't, hold on to it tightly and make that your new story, but use that as a catalytic event to let something new emerge. Whether it's like again, just since I'm the one talking, I'll use myself as the example. I had hernia surgery last year and I had an ER visit for a torn calf muscle that I was happy was a torn calf because when I heard the pop, I was like, is that my Achilles? I don't know. And in both instances, even once, I needed the hernia surgery. It would, some people can live with hernias, no problem. Mine kept getting larger. But I learned so much about myself through these processes. One thing I learned, and this has been my experience generally, and Ido will talk about this a lot if you ever listen to one of his podcast interviews, is that medicine is very good for fixing an issue like a hernia, or if like you need to go to the ER, the doctor is great. They're going to save your life. But as far as healing post trauma, a lot of doctors will still use like the RICE, the rest, ice, compression, elevation acronym. And that again is still very useful if you've got a lot of swelling or a serious trauma or just post surgery. But day of my hernia surgery, afterwards, I was doing my standing practice, the stuff that looked like Tai Chi. And I walked to the gym the next day. And my wife was angry about that. And I did call her because I needed a ride home. I couldn't handle it. But I just walked. I lifted like a little 5-pound weight around just to see what things was like. Movement is healing. And I mean that in like a truly physical way. Mm-hmm. In order to move, in order to get nutrition to healthy and unhealthy tissue alike, blood has to move it there. And for the blood to move it there, you've got to move your body. I mean, your heart will do it while you're sleeping or while you're at rest. But if you really want to heal an area, you've got to move it. Whether, like, for example, the teenager I'm working with, the American Ninja Warrior, or maybe it's just Ninja Warrior competitor at his age, had a pretty severe ankle sprain, like a bone chip as well. And his mom was texting me, and he was like, we're going to put him in this walking boot, and I was like, I get it for the first few days, but if you cast a limb, even a healthy limb, for a long enough period of time, and you take that cast off, what does it look like? It looks dead. It looks desiccated. It looks small. Not that like hypertrophy is cool muscle, but like it looks withered. It looks old, and it moves like it's old. There's like a race between, not a race. It's maybe not the wrong terminology, or not the right terminology, but like you need to support an injury structurally, but only for as long as necessary. And then it's time to, even if it's like you break a finger and you don't need to like hang from a bar, but man, it's probably better to start exploring the edges of what's possible. So even with, and this is what I've found with my clients specifically, is like an injury, a setback, and they will happen. Do I want an injury to happen to myself or anyone? No, but part of being in a relationship with a client is that like we're going to move through it together, both like emotionally and psychologically, but physically. Like if you can't walk, we're just going to sit, and we're still going to move around a little bit, and then we might sit and breathe. But like, man, yeah, these are lessons that I feel very grateful to have direct experience with, both in my body, but with my clients too. It's again, these highs and lows, the contrasts that are the most fruitful.
Dude, everything you're saying like hits home for me. Like I mentioned my my left hip
Yes,
earlier
right.
in this conversation, dude. Like that was crazy for me, man. Like I'd never been in a position where I woke up and the first thing I thought about was my pain. right? Like
Yeah,
I'd never been
sure.
in that, dude. And then you
Yeah.
get into this loop of that where you
Yeah.
wake up and you're almost like the first thing you think about, you're checking in with your pain, like, hey, is my pain here? Right.
Yep.
Which is crazy, dude. But again, like as soon as like I was just switched my focus to like, okay, uh, let's do my best, again, difficult, but let's do my best to get out of like identifying with this pain, get out of like identifying with this, oh, like, or like submitting to it, like, oh, this is the way it's going to be now. Let's go out, dude, and like let's see what I can find. Like,
Yeah.
what can I learn? Who can I attract that can help me, and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. And dude, I learned so much, and I did heal it, right?
Yep.
And it was so beautiful to have that experience. I've learned so much, and it's so cool because you have those experiences, and then you naturally get to share them, right? The whole teach, learn,
Yes.
teach thing, right, is so cool. But a lot of this stuff is contrary to certain methods that we're taught, by Western medicine and stuff like this. Another example is one of my really good friends here is a chiropractor. His name's Dr. Brett Jones. He tore his Achilles, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Complete tear,
Wow.
and was told that he has to get surgery. Like most people get told they have to get
Yes.
surgery for that, and was like, I'm not going to get surgery for that. I'm going to do whatever I can to make this thing reattach naturally. And so he
Hmm.
did, dude. He was very focused, had it in a boot for certain times of the day, had it out of the boot
Yes.
for other times of the day, right? And was doing a lot of different modalities, right? And it reattached, right? Now,
It's a beautiful example.
it's crazy, man. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen for everybody. What I am
No.
saying, though, is like we are much more powerful than we are told by many people, and that
Hmm.
sometimes we even think we are.
It's
Um,
also it's also worth the effort to try,
Try, dude. Try,
because you can
man.
always get the surgery. Like
100%.
that's I tell like even my clients that when they're injured, I was like, talk to as many doctors as you want. Go all the way through with that process if that's what you want to do first. But be open to the possibility that you don't necessarily need to go that route first.
Hmm.
You know, explore, like not just explore in the sense of like search out people and modalities, just like explore your body, like move it around, see what you can and can't do, and then take 100% responsibility for it.
Mm.
Like um this is another good example of like when I work with people, like uh they're doing all the work. I'm just there to hold the space, to facilitate the conditions for something to emerge. uh but I might show them, be like, hey, try and wiggle that, try and put some weight on it, try. And if it, and like experiment. Most like in science, like it is still valuable if an experiment fails.
Hmm.
You're still
Hmm.
learning something from that failed experiment. Now, obviously, with our bodies, we want to do it in a structured, contained environment.
Yeah, I don't want to make it worse. We want
But
to do our
yeah,
best not to make it worse.
yeah, do our best to not make
Yeah,
it worse.
yeah.
Exactly. But like your chiropractor friend is a wonderful example. Specifically, I liked what you said, that he had the boot on sometimes,
Hmm.
he took it off sometimes.
Hmm.
That's what I mean by personal responsibility. And to be honest, I haven't spoken to a doctor directly about this, but there's no doubt in my mind that the protocols that they suggest are there because they do not know how much personal responsibility their patient can take for themselves. You know,
Yeah.
so the safest thing, also from maybe a litigation perspective, is to be like the most conservative. And so have that as one bound of your container. And then have as the other bound of your container 100% your own responsibility. And then examine for yourself, where do you lie on this spectrum? Do you want to give all of your responsibility to the expert? That's fine. People do that all the time, and they live very fruitful lives. Do you want to have 100% of the responsibility? That's good too. There's costs to both. And most people are going to vacillate
Yeah.
depending on the injury or the thing we're talking about. Um, but I think it's nice to consider that each of us has the choice.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And even though we may not feel powerful within those moments, if we can
No.
find if we can find that within,
Yeah.
it's really important.
Yeah, man.
Dude, I feel like I could talk to you forever. So I definitely want to have you back on. But is
Well,
there
yeah, one of my secret wishes I can tell you now is like maybe I'll be the one who does the longest episode.
um, is there is there anything else that you feel kind of called to talk about today, knowing that we can go for as long as we want?
Yeah, thank you for asking, man. No, I definitely have over talked already. One thing I realize is like I'm very new to being interviewed like this. It's kind of the first time I've done this. So um no, I'm good. I think
Just
I
from my
and what
perspective, you have not overtalked at all. Like everything, this is why I'm doing this. Like this is why
yeah,
we're doing this, right? Like
yeah,
this is the whole point. Like what you have to share is so beautiful and I would say very unique, man. Because like I, when it comes to like certain professions or even certain hobbies, there aren't many people that do what you do compared to like I don't know, man, like a surgeon or a teacher or something like that, right? It's like
sure.
what you do is
Yes,
like really
yes.
cool and really amazing. Not that what other people do in the cool,
Thank
but you
you.
know what I mean,
Yeah,
right?
I
And
get it.
so it's nice, dude. I want you to share as much as you
Well,
possibly can, and that's
then
why I want you back on.
thank you. Yeah. So one thing that did come to mind is if people thought this was interesting, just listen to the episode again. I think what happens, and this happens to me sometimes, is I get so interested in new and more information.
Hmm.
I don't always reflect on the things that I found enriching in that moment. And that a good practice, something I like to do, is go back and listen to a podcast that I've enjoyed before. And maybe it's the first time I did it in the car or in like the kitchen while I'm cooking. And that's like the filtering process. And it's like that was a wonderful experience in the moment. And then if there was one that really hit home, maybe I'll actually sit down with a pen and a paper or, a computer or your phone to however you like you, and then write down things that I agreed with or liked, but equally important, write down things that I disagreed with and didn't like. Because both are worth exploring. Both are worth being curious about.
Yeah, I do the same thing, man. I do the same
Yeah,
thing. And so I guess before we go, just
sure.
share your Instagram, share your contact details,
Yes,
where you
thank you.
work, how people can get in contact with you if they desire
Wonderful.
to.
I really appreciate you offering that.
Yeah.
The easiest way right now, because I am sort of just in the beginning of feeling comfortable um, doing work with people that I don't see directly, the easiest is just going to be my Instagram account, which is just my name at Carter Twitty, CarterTwitty. Just send me a DM. If you'd like to chat, I'd love to get on a call, even if it's 15 minutes or something, just to see if it's a good fit or not. But that's the place to begin for now. Yeah.
Cool,
Thanks,
man.
man.
Well, dude, I appreciate your energy. I appreciate your time and
Yes.
excited to be with you soon in
Yes.
Miami.
Yes, dude. Me too.
Yeah,
What
and
an
excited to
opportunity.
do this again in the future.
No doubt.
Cool. All right, brother. Have a great day.
Awesome. You too, bro.